Hey there, everyone. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I think it's time we talk about Ben 10 again. I've kind of been mulling it over for a little while, and I decided that I think I probably should give the next series of Ben 10 a quick look-see and give my thoughts. It was a decision I had to kind of weigh out, but at the end I felt it was for the best, and it's something that I think you people will be looking forward to. So, well, yeah, I guess after much wait and deliberation, today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be talking about the very first episode of Ben 10, the reboot. Yep, I'm sure that's what you wanted, right? I mean, why wouldn't I want to talk about the reboot? I mean, it's the latest thing out there. It's what's on, and apparently it's getting a spin-off soon, so why not give it a look-see, give my thoughts on it and so forth. I mean, I think there's probably not another show you want to talk about. I already gave my thoughts on Ultimate Alien and Omniverse. I haven't talked about the reboot, so why not? Okay, April Fools, everybody. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to keep this joke up through the rest of the video, but I am going to be talking about the first episode of the reboot. My stance on whether I'm going to be looking at Ultimate Alien or Omniverse is still kind of on the fence. Probably don't really want to, but may end up doing it in the future I'm open to change my mind about it, is what I mean. But I am going to really be looking at the first episode of the Ben 10 reboot, and firstly, I want to talk about the what my perspective was going into the reboot when it was first starting out. Like, when I first heard of the reboot, I was kind of skeptical, mostly because I had already fallen out of Ben 10 by the time the reboot was announced. And on top of that, the designs, while not as weird and not as kind of janky, I suppose, as Omniverse, still looked a lot more cartoony than what I was kind of hoping for out of Ben 10. But at the same time, it was a Ben 10 series that was going to be solely worked on by Man of Action. So I kind of had hopes, and while there were some previews and so forth that kind of made me scratch my head, I thought, I can probably still deal with this. I'd rather wait until it comes. I waited until it was coming out. And originally, I was planning on doing a separate vlog series on the Ben 10 reboot when it first started out, but unfortunately, when the reboot actually aired on TV, it was aired in the UK first. The US didn't get until a few months later, so. And by that time, I kind of made up my mind about it. I had seen an episode, I'd seen a few clips here and there. Otherwise, it looked, and straight to the point, I didn't really want to talk about it. But I figured, but for today, I wanted to actually talk about it. I actually molded, and I actually thought this way ahead in advance, but I figured that, I just figured, why not? This will be my chance to get to talk about the reboot and give my thoughts on it. So today we are actually going to be talking about the first episode of the Ben 10 reboot. But of course, there's still one more thing we have to discuss. And that is which first episode. Because believe it or not, there's more than one. While both the UK and the US had different first episodes that were aired. As such, when I was going to look at the first episode, I kind of mulled over which one I wanted to talk about. And I ultimately decided to go for a twofer. I would look at the first episode that aired in the UK and the first episode that aired in the US. So, I apologize. It was kind of the length of a regular episode of Ben 10 because the episodes of the reboot are 11 minutes each. So, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on both. So, today we're going to be discussing the first episodes of the Ben 10 reboot, Water Filter and The Filth. And I'll just talk. So, first, we'll go with the UK first episode. In this case, Water Filter. So before we get into the episode, let's talk about the reboot. Let's talk about the premise of the reboot. As a reboot, it's essentially starting all the way back to square one. In this case, the premise is the same as the classic series. Ben Tennyson is a 10-year-old kid who discovers an alien watch that affixes itself to his wrist and allows him to transform into 10 different aliens, and he's on summer vacation with his cousin Gwen and their grandfather Max in their RV called the Rust Bucket. They're traveling around the country, fighting monsters, seeing the sights, and so forth. And pretty much the series is just about the adventures they go on. The reboot, the reboot is no different in that thing. And so for this episode, Yep, they end up going to Niagara Falls. Ben, of course, thinks it's a little boring until he hears water's involved, and apparently this version of Ben has a habit of just being of cannonballing into water no matter what. On top of that, he seems to really like doing stupid stuff through something he calls Ben tuition, which in itself sounds stupid. Of course, Gwen is telling Ben that he shouldn't be cannonballing into Niagara Falls and that maybe he should have a filter for his Ben tuition, which the more I say it, the worse it sounds, and Gwen says that she can be that filter because she thinks that he can have some good ideas, but at the same time he kind of needs something to get through them. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My dog is running into places where he shouldn't. Anyway, while I'm talking about this, I might as well talk about one of the changes the reboot did. In this case, it's kind of Ben and Gwen's relationship. In the classic series, when at the beginning, Ben and Gwen were kind of hostile to each other. And it's because they had very differing personalities. Ben was laid back, just kind of go with the flow while also just being a kid that being a average 10-year-old boy wanting to roughhouse and just kind of doing whatever he wanted. While Gwen was more analytical and planned things out, and her idea of fun was almost the exact opposite of Ben's. Not exactly, but almost. As such, they always butted heads on things because of just how different they were. They liked to make fun of each other. She called them they like to make fun of each other, and so just in the reboot, it's very different. While Ben is still kind of a doofus and Gwen is still street smart, their personalities are a lot more different. Ben is not as laid back as he is in this one, as he is in the classic series. In fact, he's actually a little bit more free-spirited, if that makes any sense. Hence the Ben tuition thing. And so he's a bit more hyper and just kind of does whatever the hell he wants, while Gwen is more level-headed, but still supportive. As such, which leads to the situation. Gwen, instead of chewing Ben out, tries to actually talk him down from doing these stupid, crazy things, including doing a cannonball into Niagara Falls. As such, Ben ends up taking her advice in this regard, and he says that he won't do anything stupid. Well, that night he immediately does something stupid, as while everyone's asleep, he goes outside of the rust bucket and goes cannonbolt and does a cannonball into Niagara Falls. And again, I suppose I should talk about this as well. The reboot also, just like in the classic series, Ben is relegated to only 10 aliens in the beginning, and actually scratch that, he's always relegated to 10 aliens. But the aliens he starts out with while there are mostly the same ones as in the classic series, there are a few exceptions. There are some changes. For example, instead of having 3 aliens are now missing, and those aliens are Wild Mutt, Ripjaws, and Ghost Freak. And in their places, we have Cannonbolt, Wildvine, and a new alien called Overflow, who I'll be getting into because this episode is his debut. And on top of that, some of their designs are really different than in the classic series. Some of them are very similar, like Four Arms looks mostly the same except with green eyes and the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. Gray Matter's about the same except his jumpsuit's green. Diamond Head's the same except he has a yellow and black jumpsuit. Upgrade, but Accelerate's mostly the same too, same with Heat Blast, but then you have stuff like Upgrade, where instead of being a giant black, green, and white blob, he's a more humanoid purple thing. And instead of speaking with Ben's voice, he has a filter voice. He has a different voice altogether. And again, he's still a blob, but his shape is less amorphous and more humanoid. Same would go for Wildvine. Cannonbolt still looks exactly the same, but Wildvine, instead of having multiple vines or legs, has 2 regular legs. And just kind of looks slimmer. He doesn't really, if you looked at him and someone said that's Wildvine, you would believe it, but at the same time, you'd be scratching your head. But the one that doesn't even look anything like their original counterpart is Stinkfly. Stinkfly, instead of being like a giant fly with those wings and everything, looks kind of like a moth, a humanoid blue moth. It's kind of like Big Chill, except less blue. It's still blue, but with a bit of green mixed in and so forth. It's just kind of weird. Like when I first saw this alien, I thought, "Who is that?" And then when I learned it was Stinkfly, I kind of thought to myself, "Really?" And that's kind of how it is with the reboot. It kind of flies loose with some of the stuff with some continuity from classic series, but I'm getting off topic once again. I'll get back to that in a bit. But anyway, so Ben goes cannonballs into Niagara Falls, and once it's done, he thinks there was no harm done. But it turns out there's actually something underneath the falls that Ben woke up by doing a cannonball. And the next day, the Tennysons wake up and find this thing attacking a nearby town. And it turns out this thing is actually just called a Hydromander. And apparently there are legends of it roaming around this place, but it only wakes up every 500 or 1,000 years or whatever. And every time it wakes up, it only does it for like essential things, like food and so forth. Hence why it's going out and attacking people. As such, Ben decides that in order to fight this thing, he needs to go alien and apparently before this episode, Ben had unlocked Overflow, but he had unlocked Overflow, but he's never actually had the chance to try him out, so he thinks it's the perfect opportunity. Gwen tries to steer him down because well, it's a new alien, he doesn't know anything about it, but Ben still says, no, I'm going to do it anyway. So he instead transforms into Overflow. And quick thoughts on Overflow. I've heard him described as a redesigned water hazard, and I would be inclined to agree. Overflow, like, I briefly talked about water hazard when I looked at the first episode of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. In this case, like, he's got a red shell and he can shoot water out of his hands and can do a variety of stuff with water. Overflow is kind of the same. He has a same red shell, but he has tanks on him but he has tanks all around him where his water is stored, and he can pretty much just do the same things as water hazard can. So, yeah, I would be inclined to agree that Overflow is just kind of like a redesign of water hazard. So, yeah, not that great an alien. Not awful, but not that great. But not that great, but whatever. So, anyway, Ben goes Overflow and tries fighting this creature, and while he's able to get a good grasp of it on land, it winds up making and is able to fend it off enough so that it hasn't hurt anybody. It still manages to retreat because it would shoot its tongue was out going across the town. It manages to retrieve its tongue and goes out to Lake Erie. The Tennysons end up following after it, and Ben wound up actually jumping into the lake again to try and fight it, but unfortunately, again, due to his inexperience, he didn't know how to deal with water hazard underwater. As such, Ben's just chastising himself because he woke this thing up by doing his cannonball, and says that he probably does need a filter. As such, they go out to Lake Erie, but when they go out there, the Hydromander seems to be dying. It seems to just be lying there motionless and seems to sprout all these warts across it before it just explodes. And of course the group think, oh, well, it's dead. Our job is done. Turns out, no, it's not. The second thing it does when it's waking up, it multiplies. And so it separates into all these tinier little Hydromanders that now want to go and feast on even more things. As such, Gwen advises Ben that maybe he needs to use an alien that he's more familiar with, in this case, Heat Blast. So Ben goes Heat Blast and tries blasting each of them, but unfortunately they keep getting up, and Personally, I would probably just create a giant blast of fire and just ignite it across the whole lake, make it super hot, so it's inhospitable. But Ben doesn't do that, and unfortunately, the Hydromanders pull him underwater before he can actually do anything. And since water trumps fire, Ben's essentially powerless under there, which even Gwen chastises herself for, because why wouldn't she think that? As such, Ben ends up turning back while the Hydromanders start kind of accosting Gwen and Max. And Ben thinks that they're kind of screwed. He doesn't know what to do. And Gwen says, just use your... I can't believe it. I'm sorry I keep saying it because it sounds so dumb. But Gwen tells Ben that he should use his Ben tuition to get out of this. She says, oh, it's great. You were fine. You're fine. Yada, yada, yada. Which, no, it wasn't, since Ben was the thing that woke these guys up in the first place. But whatever. Ben decides to go Overflow again, and somehow he's managed to get a better grasp of what he can do underwater. Even though the last time he was underwater, I think it'd be more. Last time he was underwater, he didn't know what to do, and I think I'd be more forgiving of him suddenly having grasped his powers if we saw him struggling still a little bit, but then suddenly getting a better grasp, but then suddenly realizing, oh, I can do. Wait, okay, I think I got it. I'd be okay with that, but we don't have that moment. As such, Ben is able to fend off the Hydromanders enough, and even knocks one out of the water, where immediately upon hitting land, it starts drying up. So Gwen says that to stop the Hydromanders, he needs to get them all out of the water. So Ben decides that the best way to do this is to do another cannonball, which he does, or Gwen tells him to do that. So he jumps in and does a cannonball, knocking all the Hydromanders out of the water, and all of them start drying up. Ben and Gwen then have a moment where Gwen says she's sorry for doing something, for interfering with his Ben tuition, even though he caused it. But Ben also acknowledges that it was his fault that all this happened in the first place, so maybe he could use a filter every now and again. But Gwen says that she shouldn't have tried imposing because they both have different ways of doing it. And before a lesson is actually learned about maybe compromise, even though Ben's kind of continually shown to be an idiot, Ben goes cannonball again, does a cannonball for, I don't know why. I felt like that nothing was learned there. Like he acknowledged his faults and then immediately did it again. So, yeah. Okay, before we get into thoughts on that, let's talk about the next episode, The Filth. In this case, it's introducing it's another set of villains that are exclusive to this show. They're called the Fly Pack, I think. I think that's what they're called, or the Fly Gang. I don't know. I only know that I only know their name because of reading the description. They never actually say it in there. Essentially, it's a scientist with Dr. Draken's voice from Kim Possible on a small bug body and the bug's head is on his big body. Essentially, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to gather as much filth as they can by gathering all these toxic waste and putting it into a machine he has, but unfortunately they don't have enough filth to fully power the machine, but as they're going, they suddenly get a whiff of other filth, and it seems to be coming from the rust bucket, as Gwen and Max are tidying up and trying to make the rust bucket clean, but unfortunately, there's still a big stench, and that's because the section of the rust bucket Ben's supposed to keep clean is just a sty. Everything is just smelly. There's nothing picked up, and Ben, instead of actually cleaning it up, is just sitting in a box watching stuff on his phone. He was Grey Matter at the time. As such, they keep telling him to do something, and Ben says, after I'm done watching the show, to which Max responds by turning off the Wi-Fi, which, unless this phone, I think he could still do, because his phone could still have LTE, but whatever. But Ben, of course, is kind of angry about this, but Max says that because he's neglected all his chores, they've all piled up. As such, while Gwen and Max are out doing stuff and just kind of exploring, in this case, they're exploring these guano caves nearby, Ben has to stay at the rust bucket and do all of his chores, which means Ben has to stay at the rust bucket and do all of his chores, and he won't get the Wi-Fi back until they're all done. Ben thinks he's going to go accelerate, and so when Gwen and Max leave, Ben goes accelerate and plans to just get them all done quickly, but when he gets to the chore list, he finds there's a note on there saying that someone wants him to clean the bumper. As such, Ben goes to clean the bumper, but it turns out that was a trap set up by the doctor. The guy, I'm just going to call him the doctor because he calls the other... Sydney. He calls the guy with the bug head Sydney. Odds are it's the bug on his body, but whatever. So I'll just call him the doctor or whatever, the scientist. So Ben goes out there, but the bumper is actually one of the few things on the rust bucket that's clean. And so when Ben goes out there, the scientist mocks Ben, not knowing he's the same kid who they just tricked out of there. And Sydney ends up punching Ben aside while they go into the rust bucket and steal it because apparently Max left the keys in there. Don't know why, but whatever. As such, Ben sees what they're doing and tries going after them, but what follows is just simply hijinks as Ben gets into a bunch of Looney Tunes-esque Roadrunner shenanigans, and because as he tries to continually head them off, like he creates a tornado's accelerate that instead sends them over a ravine that they wouldn't have been able to cross otherwise. When Ben tries pushing a boulder down on them, they stop because they think they're reading their map wrong. So it misses them completely and instead rolls around and crushes Ben. And then Ben tries going cannonball to go out to try and ram into them, but they turn off and but then they slow down and turn off, so Ben misses them and instead rams into some rocks. So Ben is just completely helpless, but he manages to track the tire tracks back to their hideout, which is an old nuclear waste facility. And he finds them, and when he gets there, he finds the rust bucket is completely 100% clean. There's not a trace of garbage or filth in there. But when Ben looks outside, he finds them taking the filth and plunging it in the machine, allowing it to fully power up. And what they're powering up is this weird machine called the Magonet. While Ben doesn't know exactly what the heck it is, he knows whatever it is probably bad, so he goes forearms to try and fight it, but we soon learn exactly what the Magonet... So Ben knocks... I forgot what it was called again. Yeah, I don't remember. Bug head, body. I just said it, too. Whatever. I know it begins with an S. But he knocks that guy aside and grabs the scientist but he turns on the Magonet anyway. It turns out the Magonet actually attracts maggots, which hence the name. It attracts maggots to it and combines them all into a giant maggot monster, which the scientist wants to sick on which a scientist wants to sick on Las Vegas, which is nearby. As such, Ben realizes he's got to stop it, so he knocks the scientist off and grabs the remote that he was using to activate everything and crutches it. But the thing was, it had an on button and an off button, so now with the remote destroyed, the maggot monster is now uncontrollable and is just going to keep eating everything. So Ben realizes he has to fight it out while the scientist and his henchmen... I'm sorry, that's going to keep bugging me. I know it begins with an S. That's not Stacy. I know it's a guy's name. Okay, yeah, I'll find it. I'll find out later when I rewatch this. But in the meantime, as such, Ben can't hurt this thing because it's made of maggots, and whatever he locks out can just reform. So then he realizes that if he wants to stop it, he needs to take out the Magonet. But unfortunately, the only thing big enough to hit it is the rust bucket. So Ben sighs, but realizes that's the only way. And so he grabs the rust bucket and tosses it to the Magonet, which in turn destroys it and stops the monster. But in the process, it makes the rust bucket covered in maggots, so Ben manages to get it back to where it's supposed to be by the time Max and Gwen come home, and he completely cleans it. Well, this time without using any powers. I'm guessing because he's had a hard day, or maybe he learned his lesson, or maybe the Omnitrix needs to recharge. I don't know. But Ben thinks, well, now this is over with, can I have my Wi-Fi back? But apparently cleaning the rust bucket was just one of his chores. There are still several others he's got to do, to which I respond with, he cleaned the whole rust bucket. I think he's done all his chores. Maybe this is about trying to let it sink in. I don't know. Kind of seems unnecessarily mean, but whatever. So, my thoughts on the episodes? They're fine, I guess. Like, it feels like in concept, I feel like these episodes would fit in with the original series, but only in concept. Like, the idea of the group going to Niagara Falls and then something Ben does awakens a monster which Ben has to defeat. That sounds like something out of the series, like out of the classic series. And same with the scientist and same with the fly gang or fly guys or fly. I don't know. I still don't remember. Same with them. They like seeing these bug guys, these bug weirdo monsters stealing the rust bucket, so Ben has to get it back. That sounds like something out of the classic series, but I feel like the execution is a little weird, so to speak. Like, something the Man of Action said that they were doing when they were making the series, that they had a heavier emphasis on comedy, and these two episodes kind of exemplify that. And I think it mostly also comes from the characters. Ben in the classic series was kind of a doofus, but this Ben feels like an even bigger doofus. Like, he feels even more lazy, he feels even more kind of lazy and just kind of even more condescending and unwilling to listen. Whereas Ben in the classic series did feel still somewhat reasonable in some regard. And I feel like something was a bit lost in translation with Gwen, though she does have some nice spice moments, especially when Max says that Ben can't go with them when they're going sightseeing. But I feel like the dynamic was lost. I can't really say much for Max since he still just since he mostly just acts as support throughout the episodes, as he gives aid where he can and gives advice here and there, and even gives Ben punishments when he doesn't do what he does. So I can't really say anything on him since I didn't really see a lot of him in the episodes. So I feel like I'd have to see more episodes in order to get a grasp on him. But otherwise, the characters don't exactly. Otherwise, Ben as a character I don't really seem to fully grasp. He feels too much like a kid, if that makes any sense. And Gwen, and on top of that, it feels like there's not really much for a moral lesson in the episodes. Like in the first, in Water Filter, the thing seemed to be Ben couldn't let his tuition get the best of him. Couldn't let his gut get the best of him because he made a lot of stupid decisions, so he needed a filter. And that was proven when he woke up the Hydromander by doing a cannonball into Niagara Falls. But by that same token, and even on top of that, because he was going with his tuition, he almost beat it. But by that same token, when Gwen decided to start giving advice, he was not faring any better, and then she said, never mind, just do what you do. And I feel like that, I don't know if they feel like that, I feel like the ultimate message they were trying to go for was that Ben and Gwen have two different ways of doing things that by themselves are not bad things. You just need to figure out what goes where. but the episode seemed to kind of show Ben more off as a moron. As immediately after learning this lesson, Ben immediately does something stupid, even though he just got through doing something stupid. As such, it doesn't really feel like it was well earned in that regard as a plot detail. And on top of that, in the next episode, I feel like this episode, I will give credit. The episode kind of deals with the whole do your chores thing a little bit better than Under Wraps, especially since Ben at the end of the day does clean the rust bucket by his own two hands. And I actually do kind of find that funny. Ben was gonna try and cheese his way through it like in Under Wraps, but then when it was taken, it got cleaned by someone else, and he was willing to just kind of go with that. But then when he kind of messed it up again, I like that at least. I feel like that kind of helped cement the lesson more. That Ben probably should have been more responsible. And if he was, then none of this would have happened. And the Fly Gang or whatever would not have targeted the rust bucket. So I kind of am okay with. So I feel like that lesson was a bit better handled than it was in Under Wraps. But the episode kind of feels pounded down by absurdity, if that makes any sense. Like, I already mentioned the Looney Tunes-esque way of Ben chasing after the Fly Gang, which is, it's really weird when you actually say there's a Looney Tunes skit in Ben 10, because when I think of Ben 10, even in Omniverse, I'm not really thinking of Looney Tunes. Well, okay, maybe Omniverse to a degree, but I think that's symptomatic of this series. I think that's symptomatic of what leads to this, but whatever. So, when I think of Ben 10, I don't think of Looney Tunes. Nothing, by themselves, they're fine, but I don't really see them, but how they're brought together feels a bit too iffy, if that makes any sense. And on top of that, when Ben starts thinking it through, there's actually just kind of like, Ben almost has an aha moment when he realizes just how kind of convoluted the Fly Gang's plot is, when he says, so you made a machine powered by garbage, then you stole our rust bucket to throw more garbage in to create a magnet that attracts maggots to create a monster. Like, when you actually say it out loud, it sounds completely absurd and just kind of weird. But Ben immediately just brushes aside and says, hey, whatever, I want to smash things, which I think is kind of funny just for kind of the absurdity, but at the same time, you say it out loud and you just kind of think, yeah, that is kind of weird. And that is kind of weird. Especially since, why would he go to the effort of making this? He, like when he sicked the maggot when he wanted to sick the maggot monster on Las Vegas, he said, go there, eat everything except the money. Like, I mean, how did you make your machine then? Why do you need why does he need the money? I don't really understand that. It kind of feels a little weird then. Like, did he make the machine out of scrap? But then, why did he make it fueled by garbage? Like, what made him want to make it fueled by garbage? I'm sure if you were able to make this thing out of scrap, you could find other various sources. I guess maybe I answered my own question. He needed to find whatever he could find, and somehow he made it garbage. But in that case, wouldn't anything work? Couldn't you make it so that anything could fuel this thing? Just throw it in and it could be converted into power? That would be okay. I think that could work. But instead, he seems focused too much on garbage, which is a little weird when you actually stop and think about it. On top, and even and again, there's still kind of the stuff with Ben's general attitude. He feels dumber, if that makes any sense. And I feel like this has been a problem that's been kind of going on ever since Season 3 of Alien Force. For some reason, they've been trying to make Ben too much like how he was as a kid, without keeping in mind why we liked Ben as a kid. Why we liked Ben in the classic series. Yeah, he was a doofus. He jumped in head first, but he at least had a good head on his shoulders. He was still street smart. He knew he had a good sense of right and wrong and did actually think things through for the most part. Yeah, he would sometimes jump in guns blazing, but more often than not, he did actually know what he was doing when he was going in. And instead of after season 3 of starting with season 3 of Ben 10 Alien Force, Ben seemed to just start losing that bit of creativity and street smarts and just started being more dumb. And it just seemed to continue going on to the point where it wasn't endearing anymore. The endearing qualities you saw in Ben as a kid seemed to be slowly being pushed aside. And that's not to say that they were completely erased, because there were some episodes in Omniverse and Ultimate Alien and so forth, and even in Season 3 of Alien Force, where that attitude came out, but more often than not, they wanted to show Ben as just kind of this big doofus who didn't really like thinking of plans. Sometimes he would, but other times there were times he wouldn't, and I feel like it got worse in Omniverse. And here's the thing: the reboot doesn't make Ben look like a complete yutz, and I'm only just saying that because I think it's the best word appropriate. But I think it's the most appropriate word to describe him. They don't make him look like a complete moron, but at the same time, he doesn't fit. But at the same time, it's just that thing. He doesn't feel like Ben. Like, I think the best way I can describe Ben in this is like an argument in Secret of the Omnitrix. One of the things that they brought up in the movie was that Ben may not be a hero because it was the right thing to do, but because he wanted the thrill of being a hero. And honestly, I didn't buy it in that movie because I had seen the entire show before seeing that, and while Ben was arrogant and full of himself at times, I genuinely believe Ben was doing what he was doing because he was a good person. He was a good kid who wanted to help people. Was he full of himself? Definitely. Did he make stupid decisions? Almost. Oh, yeah. But at the end of the day, I felt like the reason Ben was doing what he was doing was because he was a good kid. He just needed help. He just needed to be pointed in the right direction. And as such, I never buyed that thing in the movie because I feel like I never bought that conflict in Secret of the Omnitrix. But if you brought that argument up here in the reboot, I think I would buy it, actually, because this Ben doesn't feel like he's doing this because he has a strong sense of right and wrong. It feels like he's doing this because it's cool. This feels like it doesn't feel like he wants to help people for the sake of helping people. Instead, feels like, oh, cool, it's like, oh, a monster. Well, time to go alien to fight it. That feels like what they're trying to push for this Ben, and I'm sorry, it doesn't fly. I don't like it. I prefer the Ben in the classic series. He had a more level head on him. He was a doofus, yeah, but he was still street smart. And Gwen, again, I felt was a little nerfed because I feel like the best thing with them was their dynamic, but because they took away her edge a bit, because they took away her edge in this new series, it feels like that she doesn't have as much of a purpose beyond being the support, if you can. Like, I feel, because in the classic series, there was some conflict there between her and her cousin, but but part of the series was that they got over it and helped each other when they could, to the point where even Gwen started getting powers and started becoming a more active part of Ben's hero career. But here, she does feel more like the support. Like, she is just there to help Ben along rather than just being another character. And she is another character, but again, it feels more like the Ben show. And I know it's called Ben 10, so why am I complaining that Ben's not sharing this? Why Ben is getting all the spotlight? I know, it feels weird. It's just that the classic series, while it was focused on Ben, still gave the other characters time to shine. Whereas, at least by these 2 episodes, it feels more like it's about what's going on with Ben, rather than just what's going on with him, rather than what's going on with everybody else. And I feel like that's another problem. And I know you could probably say, well, it's a new show. You should probably judge it by its own merits. Well, I can't. I grew up with the classic series, so I'm sorry. I'm going to compare it to that. If you're watching it by yourself, but even then, by itself, it just seems meh. I said the first 2 episodes were probably all right for what they were, and I think they aren't awful. They're not bad, but I don't think they're that great either. I mean, if you let your kid watch these 2 episodes, I think they'd be entertained enough, but I feel like that they get more from watching another episode from the classic series or Alien Force or the first half of Ultimate Alien. But it feels like it would just be something to keep your kids busy for 11 minutes while you went off to do something. Whereas if you could put them in front of the classic Ben 10, they probably have a lot more fun and actually get more into it. But as such, this show doesn't feel like that to me. And unfortunately, that's what feels sad. But that's what's sad about it too, because it feels like that there is a little bit of a spark there. Like I said, in concept, these first 2 episodes were fine. In the concept, these episodes probably would have fit in with a classic series. But the thing is, the more you actually stop and think about it, the more you actually try to kind of the more you see the execution, the more the facade starts to kind of fade away. And again, I'm not saying that I didn't have my moments of as a fan watching these shows. Like, it's still cool to see Ben just smack down on the Omnitrix while choosing his alien. And something I liked is that for the first season at least, Ben has the original design for the Omnitrix, so nice throwback there. But otherwise, I feel like the execution could have been better in the episode, and unfortunately, it's because I feel like it also comes from the comedy aspect. And I feel like this is a prevalent problem throughout the show. And I have seen a few clips here and there, and a couple episodes here, and some episodes here, and some episodes. And I feel like the biggest problem is that it is focusing too much on the comedy. There is a plot there, but it feels more like an excuse to have these jokes. Like, today I actually saw a video, I forgot, from Kuru. No, that's not him. I forgot what he was called. I'll have to look it back up later. But I saw a video, I'll probably put it in the description tomorrow. I saw a video talking about the reboot, and it was described as it was compared to like a sitcom in cartoon form, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't buy that. Like, it feels like there is an attempt to try, but it feels like there's a spark of what made the classic series good in there, and there is some bits of creativity, but it's buried under all this. It's buried under a bunch of jokes and gags and just kind of a bunch of other segues. And unfortunately, I feel like that kind of brings it down. And that's unfortunately also, and I feel like that's the way for the rest of the series. And the rest of the series, I'm not going to say is all bad. And on top of, because I have tried keeping up with it, and there are some things I find interesting. As I said, Ben, throughout the series, only has 10 aliens. Like, they're keeping the motif of Ben 10, but there are some aliens that get moved out as others get moved in. Like, at the end of season 1, we had the introduction of this continuity's version of Vilgax, and it allows Ben to have more than 10 aliens, giving him an 11th alien that he calls Gax, which is essentially Vilgax's species, which he loses shortly after when Vilgax absorbs it to make himself stronger. But at the end of those episodes, Ben rebooted the Omnitrix upgrade, but in the process he lost upgrade and gained a new alien called Shockrock. And I'll admit I actually do kind of like Shockrock. I actually do like Shockrock. He's a rock alien with electric powers, and I like electric powers, so I'm always going to find that cool. And on top of that, Shockrock came with the Omni-enhanced mode, where some bit of Shockrock's power can be added to the aliens and give them extra abilities that they can use in battle. But even then, they had another storyline that surrounded Shockrock that I found to be a little interesting. That Shockrock's people, the Fulmini, were alien conquerors. They went from world to world and took over the planet, and every time Ben transformed into Shockrock, he was sending a signal back to their home planet through the Omnitrix. And so they eventually managed to repurpose that signal and travel to Earth into the Omnitrix, and through the Omnitrix they were going to try and take over the planet, which I found interesting. And again, after that, the Omnitrix got rebooted and redesigned, and again, Ben lost 3 of his aliens. I think they were Overflow, Wildvine, and Grey Matter, or I could be wrong. I think he might have lost Shockrock too. I don't know. But in the place of the 3 aliens he lost, he got a new alien called Slapback, which I don't really care that much for. He's pretty much, if you slap on the back, he divides into 2 smaller versions, which, don't really see the use of that. But in the process, he also gets Wrath and Humongousaur from Ben 10 Alien Force. And that's another thing that I think the reboot, I kind of find interesting with the reboot, but kind of mixed. That they try and integrate stuff from other series into it. Like in season 1, Ben fights Billy Billions, a villain from the first series. No, not first series, from Omniverse. On top of that, they even have their own version of Michael Morningstar. But in this version, instead of being an energy vampire that sucks the energy out of girls and make himself stronger, he's a tween idol that gets power from admiration, which I admit is different, but I'm kind of okay with. That sounds like a decent interpretation. But with that, there also comes some changes that I kind of mixed on. Like, for example, this show has its own version of Kevin, and like I said, and I might have said this in the beginning, but they were actually thinking about even doing a reboot with Kevin. But in this case, but in the classic series, Kevin had the power to absorb energy and repurpose it, and he and Ben wound up clashing because they had similar personalities, but Kevin was more willing to hurt people to get what he wanted, whereas Ben was not. Whereas Ben was not, and so they clashed because they wound up clashing, and they both wound up changing because and they both wind up fighting because of their differing views of the world. But whereas in the reboot, Kevin is not a mutant and instead is just an average bully for Ben, and he doesn't have the power to absorb things. He instead has his own Omnitrix called the Antitrix, which in concept I think would be kind of cool. Like Kevin has his own Omnitrix so that he can actually match Ben. On top of that, his aliens are a lot more powerful than Ben's. It's just how it's executed. Because the Antitrix that Kevin has, he made it. He one night had a dream where he saw the Omnitrix blueprints somehow, and managed to somehow recreate this highly advanced piece of alien technology, complete with DNA signatures, which they have shown in the series are not stored on another planet, but within the Omnitrix, and somehow he made it better. That sounds stupid. And again, I'm open. I think that would be. It does sound kind of cool. Another Omnitrix, more powerful aliens meant to counter Ben's. But in practice, it sounds a little dumb when you say it out loud. And I feel like that's ultimately kind of what the big problem with the reboot is. Style over substance. Like, it has the makings for Ben 10. It has some of the essential elements. But it feels like it's just throwing those elements out there for brand recognition. Like, imagine it with me, if you will, that if this was the very first Ben 10 series, that if the first 4 series never happened, and this was the series that we grew up with as kids, do you think Ben 10 would have lasted as long as it would have? Or do you think it would have been, because honestly, if this was the series that I grew up with, I think I probably would have been canceled. I feel like that after a while, I think the show would have just kind of fallen flat and people wouldn't have cared anymore. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case. It's meant to be a reboot to try and get to the new audiences, but at the same time, it's utilizing imagery from the previous series and shows to try and egg on people who are watching it because it's related to Ben 10. And unfortunately, I don't feel like it accomplishes that bit of nostalgia. It's just saying, oh look, this character's here, or this alien's here, or whatever, but it doesn't fully capture what made that character, what kind of makes the character. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes there are some interesting ideas, like I mentioned with Shockrock and the Fulmini, and Vilgax is back and probably just as arrogant, though I feel like his classic series incarnation is still his best incarnation. They even have Dr. Animo, and from what I've seen of him, he's still as big a ham as ever. But the storylines feel too much. The storylines feel too focused on trying to be in your face and trying to get your attention, rather than trying to tell a compelling story. It feels more like they're trying to get a laugh, and I feel like it's another problem with Ben's character, and I think one of the bigger reasons why his character is the way it is. In the classic series, they wrote the jokes around the character. Like, they did have gags with Ben making fun of his stupidity or his arrogance, but then for this new series, it's the opposite. They wrote the character around the jokes. They took the basic concept with Ben and said, okay, we have jokes here, so let's make the character fit them. And unfortunately, I feel like that's exactly what the show kind of boiled down to in the end of the day. The reboot, and again, I'm not saying all this to dissuade people from watching the reboot. If you like the reboot, it's fine. Like I said, it does still have some things in there that I think are creative. Like, I did see the clips with Wrath when he came about, and while the voice actor is different, it's still Wrath, and I love Wrath just for the sake of him being Wrath. But again, if you asked me, if this was the Ben 10 show that I had grown up with, I don't think it would have kept me. I think eventually I probably would have wanted to watch something else. If other shows came on, I think it would have just kind of fallen flat. And I think maybe another problem could be maybe condensed storytelling, but I don't know. I feel like you still could tell a good story. And again, even these first 2 episodes weren't awful. They felt like they could still tell the story in the condensed time. It just felt like the plots were just kind of too focused on one thing when they should have been on another. But otherwise, like I said, the first 2 episodes are fine, not great, but just kind of but if you're just in the mood to watch some mindless action, some mindless weirdness, some mindless stupidity, you probably could get some entertainment value. There probably is some entertainment value there. And I'll even give credit so that the reboot does actually kind of still have some nice lore there, and I like that. But otherwise, I don't think this is the show I'll be returning to very often. I'll probably glance back at it to see if there's anything cool or creative, because while I may not watch the show as much, I still like the minutia of it. But otherwise, if you ask me if I wanted to watch an episode, I'd probably say nothing. Nah. I'd probably just I think that's the exact reaction you would get, which is sad because I do want to like Ben 10 again, and I still love the minutia of it. I still love the creativity. The concept is still really cool and fun. And I even heard, and from that same video, I heard that compared the reboot to a sitcom. I heard that Warner Brothers is even planning on making another reboot of the series, except this one's live action. And while I'm a little hesitant with that idea too, I would be okay with seeing where it went if they wanted to make that route. But for what we have here, I'm not a fan. I don't think I ever will be a fan of this show. And I'm sorry for all of you people who out there who genuinely like the reboot, because if you like it, fine. That's your opinion, and I don't want to take that away from you. If you like the show, then go ahead and like it. As I said, there's still some things in there that are creative and are a little fun. But for what I saw, it wasn't bad, but honestly, it wasn't for me. And it was not for me, and I honestly don't think I'll ever find myself enjoying it. So, yeah. That's pretty much all I have to say then. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in Friday when we return back to Danny Phantom for the proper vlog. So, yeah. I'll see you next time. Take care.